even if to get there you had to go up in the air over a bridge or down in a tunnel underground, and they were miles apart, we'll call it contiguous if you can get there, right? The reality is there's nothing viable or contiguous about what's left in the West Bank. That's why these, let's see. If you look at, this is on territorial fragmentation. This is the West Bank, right, this little bit here. The brownish here, that's Israeli territory. Now if you look at that, you see that that's contiguous. In that contiguous territory are these little bits, these little white bits here. That's the Palestinian areas, which amount to a total of about 30 or 40% of the West Bank. But they're not connected to each other. All of them are divided by these roads and bridges. They're separate entities. You can't get from one to the other without going through Israeli-controlled checkpoints. The model of it that I always thought was useful is if you have a prison and the inmates are allowed full control of the cell blocks, and the prison guards only control the hallways, you know, between the cells. Well, the reality is the prisoners would actually control 90% of the territory, but it wouldn't matter because the jailers control the part that separates them, right? So it's the same thing in the West Bank. What they're trying to do is concentrate the Palestinians into tinier and tinier blocks of territory and annex, as you said, annex the rest. The annexation of Jerusalem was done right after the 1967 war, not recognized by the rest of the world. And I think the problem is they're trying to create enough facts on the ground that eventually people will stop asking for viability. The danger is that there will be a two-state solution imposed. It's one of the big problems, I think, with the debate about two states, one state, which is that all the people working on one state options have created a very good set of analyses about why two-state solution isn't going to work. It's not contiguous, it's not supportable, it's not viable, it's not sustainable, it's not just, it's not comprehensive, it's not any of those things. And therefore it's going to have to be one state because that's going to be the reality. And then we have to figure out how to do that in a democratic way, how to have a one person, one vote arrangement, how to have a civil rights movement to get there. The problem is, I don't think it works that way. I don't think that because it's not viable, not contiguous, not sustainable, not comprehensive, not just, that doesn't mean we're not going to get it. Somebody's going to impose something they're going to call a two-state solution. They're going to find some Palestinian leader to sign off on it. And it's not going to work, it's not going to be just, it won't be sustainable, it won't be comprehensive, it won't be any of those things. But it's going to have international support in the United Nations. And from that moment on, anyone who doesn't recognize it will be considered a hopeless irredentist and probably a terrorist, and subject to dismissal at best, annihilation at worst. So it's a very dangerous reality that the Israelis are up to with U.S. complicity on the ground. Now the question about what can change for the U.S., it's certainly true. Our democracy is thoroughly flawed, and public opinion doesn't determine policy. We know that. But I will say two things about that. One is that policy changes will not and cannot happen without first having that discourse change. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary. So there will be no change in U.S. government policy without a massive change in U.S. public opinion. Now, that doesn't, as I said, that doesn't mean that once we have public opinion on our side, it means X. But it does mean that there's the basis for holding individual members of Congress on occasion, the White House on occasion, other policymakers on occasion, more accountable than we can if we don't have public opinion on our side. One example, the possibility of pressure from the pro-Israeli lobbies, both the traditional Jewish organizations, the Council of Presidents, AIPAC, etc., and the newer, wealthy Christian lobbies, the Christian Zionist lobbies. In both cases, what they bring to the table is two things. One is money, the other is votes. The votes mean that, particularly for the longer established Jewish lobby groups, they can tell members of Congress in certain key parts of the country, in parts of California, in New York, in Florida, in a few other key areas, we can deliver. We can deliver the votes. The other thing they say is, we can deliver you money, if you toe the line, and if you don't, we can deliver money to your opponent, even more significantly. Well, the problem is, they can't any longer. They still have the money, and they still are using it to threaten members of Congress, but they don't any longer have the votes. So if you want evidence, just look at the 2008 elections. AIPAC, the Council of Presidents, all these groups came out against Obama, saying, you should not vote for Barack Obama. You should not vote for Barack Hussein Obama. He's not good for Israel. He's not good for the Jews. He doesn't really support Israel, etc., etc. At the end of the day, 78% of American Jewish voters voted for Obama. So they can't deliver the votes anymore. They still have the money. It's an issue, but it's weaker than it used to be. The final question was about
McMullen and
McMullen. Yeah, I think that what was being reflected by McMullen and Petraeus and these other guys in the Pentagon is something that people in the Pentagon have understood for a long time. And it's what we were talking about at the beginning of all this. The U.S. relationship with Israel does not make us safer. It's not only U.S. troops that are in danger, it's ordinary Americans walking around the street in Casablanca or in Tel Aviv or whatever. We're not as safe as we used to be because of those policies. Why did they feel the courage to sort of go public with it? Part of it is Petraeus is so arrogant that he thinks that he's already running the country. It's very dangerous that he's now back in a new, higher-ranking power. The same with Mullen. But I think that the potential there is, I mean, certainly for us, it's a gift. It's something to hold up. The statement alone doesn't mean anything unless we keep reminding people that even the highest-ranking members of the U.S. military acknowledge it is not keeping us safer. To the contrary, it's putting us at greater risk. It's only significant if we use it. It's like international law. By itself, doesn't mean jack. I carry around the UN Charter in my bag and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights for reference. But you know what? It's a piece of paper. Unless we hold it up as a weapon, as a tool to demand enforcement, and we mobilize people around it and teach people what it says and what that means and what our obligations are. That's why building a campaign based on international law and human rights is our best shot at ending U.S. support for Israeli occupation and apartheid.
Occupation is a crime!
From Iraq to Palestine!
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 Our government is funding genocide all across the Middle East. It's imperialism, it's colonialism, and it's being done with our tax dollars. It is time to rise up and tell our government that we will no longer stand for genocide in our name. Free Palestine! Intifada!
Everyone has to do something. Whether you could do it in your hand, do it. If you can join the flotilla, join it. If you can do it with your mouth, speak it. And the least you could do is just in your heart feel how evil, how bad the Israeli actions against the Palestinians. Because they are terrorists. Because they are murderers, because they kill at will, they kill without any reasons. They wanted to send a signal to anyone. If you try to break the blockade, we will kill you just as we killed those people. But they are dead wrong. Because when they killed Rachel Corrie, we had the flotilla today. And because of those martyrs that have died in the seas, we will have many more flotillas until that blockade is dead.